Welcome to Nobody Knows Anything, the DNC Autopsy in all of its glory, quasi-released?
The Autopsy.
Yeah, the problem was less the releasing and more the autopsy-lessness of it all.
Yeah, it didn't quite... it didn't quite autopsy.
Yeah, there were words. They just weren't super report-y or informative or, true as shown by the DNC marking them up, being like, we don't agree with any of this. It was like, it's your report.
Yeah, and so it confirmed basically the thing that we had been saying on the show and that we had been hearing around sort of the Democratic space, that this was just an operator error. Oops. Just a big oopsie. Isaac Dovere reporting in CNN, Autopsy of the Autopsy, how CNN's 2024 post-mortem turned into a crisis. And Isaac Dovere, for those who do not know, is one of the leading reporters on the Democratic Party and on Democratic stuff. And what I will say is when Isaac writes a story, every now and again, it'll just be a banger. I was at the DNC, and one of the most indelible memories of my career was in 2014. He wrote this story about DNC Chair Debbie Wasserman Schultz. It's like 1,000 pages. It had all kinds of stuff. And like sitting in the bullpen at the DNC, silence coming over the enterprise as people were waiting for the story to drop. This had been sort of rumored to be dropping for the last couple of weeks. It was like a thing when you would get drinks with somebody, they'd be like, "Do you hear about this Isaac story?" So, really a lot of rumors. And Isaac he's got the goods in it. He has the actual autopsy itself, such as it existed.
Yes, to the extent that there is an autopsy, it is now out there. And I think we have learned why they did not want this released.
Yeah.
Namely, it's just a bunch of like unfinished thoughts, and they don't talk about a ton of stuff that happened. And it's literally marked up by the DNC being like, this is not what the DNC thinks.
Yeah.
So not good.
In the article, they lay out how the DNC Autopsy did not talk to senior staff, except for one, baby.
This guy.
They also talked to Becca Siegel, did analytics. If you read the thing, he talked to members of the polling team as well. They detail how, the job was basically given to Paul Rivera, the guy who did it, as sort of a friend.
A thing.
Just a quick little thing to do for a friend on the side.
We've been buddies forever. Why don't you just do a very expensive or not expensive, because he did it all as a charity, just a big old report on what went wrong in 2024, which is 2 decades after Paul last worked on a campaign, I think.
Yes, they do outline that Paul's last engagement was in the 2004 campaign. I will say, in my experience, and I don't want to be, it is unfair. I mean, Paul obviously was put in a very tough position.
Oh, yeah.
I don't
blame Paul. I blame Ken Martin.
Yeah, and we'll talk more about this. Paul just did a very bad job. The article detailing AI slides that he had been presenting, sort of mixed reviews, all the above. And then they actually have the autopsy, Ken Martin, with a statement that they put out. They put it out on Substack. They said, when I was elected DNC chair, I commissioned an after-action review of the 2024 election that I wanted to be honest and transparent.
Super honest. Super transparent.
Nailed it on both. When I received the report late last year, it wasn't ready for prime time, not even close. And because no source material was provided, it should have meant starting over. I could not in good faith put the DNC's stamp of approval on the report that was produced. And he's releasing the report, full transparency in its entirety, and edited and abridged. Kind of a fascinating situation here. Ken kind of being forced into a situation where he had to put it out, I think, by this story. I mean, the reason it's coming out and the reason it came out today is, I think, because Isaac was writing this piece and they had to get ahead of it.
Right, which, again, is not super, honest and transparent. Is more like, oh, fuck, this is going to come out anyways. Now let's put out this statement. But, none of this has been transparent. And, to your credit, you told me, when we were talking about doing this show months ago, and you were like, I might at some point put out my own autopsy. I started writing this thing because, it was clear to me that this Paul guy was not running any process that was going to result in a serious piece of work. And, you didn't have confidence that they would even, communicate what you actually told them. So you were doing it for your own, cover your own ass. And we're here's what I told them.
Yeah. Again, I think we talked about this last week when my little Rob Topsy whatever came out, it was a function of a conversation that I felt like wasn't going great and wasn't going to be awesome. And, portions of the discussion, I mean, I will be honest, a lot of the discussion was not me talking.
That's insane. That's insane. Also, like the vibes I'm getting is like when you're talking to a waitress or a waiter that seems like it's like his first day and he's just not writing anything down, but also is like, do we have soup? And you're just like, I would feel a lot better if you were taking notes at least. And then they come back and they're like, we brought you the steak. And you're like, I ordered a Caesar salad.
I used to wait tables. I've waited tables twice in my life. Once was at a restaurant called Gatherings in North Reading, Massachusetts.
North Reading.
And my very first day working, I was asked for an iced coffee, and I did not know how to make an iced coffee. And then I had to use, I didn't know credit versus debit, so I tried to debit someone's card. So I've been that waiter. I have been Dovere trying to make iced coffee.
Ken Martin may be waiting tables soon.
Yeah. Slinging Juicy Lucy's down by the bar. Yeah, I mean, the thing with the autopsy, you see the jam that Ken Martin is in. There's a tweet from Ettinger. I kind of understand Ken Martin's position now here. It's not like the autopsy was wrong or problematic conclusions or anything. It just gets basic facts wrong on every page. And I think the thing to understand with it is it is not an autopsy. It is a 100-page opinion piece from a guy who wasn't involved about what happened. And so you read it, and it is a manifesto. And again, here I am talking about a manifesto. I just put out the longest
manifesto guy,
whatever. But a manifesto from a guy who wasn't involved. And so there's some opinions in there, some of which are not wrong. They're just sort of not based in any data or interviews with anybody.
Right. And I mean, we'll go through some of the most insane parts, but this thing is marked up by the DNC all over the place, being like, we have no data that supports this conclusion. This is not how PACs work. I mean, how is this the product? And then I think the bigger question, and we can get into this later, but why were we sold a bunch of bullshit for the last 18 months if this was the situation? I personally would have been like, it's funny that the Democrats are so bad at things, but if Ken Martin had been in May of last year instead of May of this year, been like, I had this guy doing the autopsy. It was so bad and not up to standard. And either we're not going to do it from now because we don't think that's the best use of resources and we're already winning all these special elections, or we're going to conduct it properly. And I'm so sorry this happened. I would have been fine with that. I would have been like, we suck, but LOL, whatever, shit happens. But instead it was 18 months of lying to us. And now we're being gaslit. That's this was a honest and transparent piece of work.
The bind that the DNC was in with this is pretty funny because obviously they're stuck. They have to do this in order to save the institution, and not save the institution, but to be in a better position with the institution. They have to make sure that no one who sees it takes it as a DNC, we stand behind this work. And so they actually put the document out with not just a thing at the top of every page that says this is not the views of the DNC. These are the views of the author, which is crazy pants.
And everyone's no source material or data was provided. They didn't even get a list of the interview list of the people that they talked to, which apparently didn't include most of the senior staff. Only lowly Rob
only lowly Rob. It is someone
crazy.
One of the people who was covering this called me and was like, "Listen, Rob, you're a nice guy, but you're not what's the there's not maybe someone more senior could
totally
called,
Totally. I mean, it's just bonkers. And then I genuinely, both of us care about the future of the Democratic Party. We want the DNC to be strong and be able to be trusted when we're going into 2028, and they're going to have a lot of responsibilities. And two, we both know people that work at the DNC currently who are fucking smart and work their asses off. And so to me, it's just such a disservice to the staff. It was very clear that a lot of the staff didn't know these circumstances either and are just learning this the same way that we are from Isaac Dovere, the same way we learn anything.
Totally.
Horrible.
Well, and this gets at something, and we'll talk more about this later, but the DNC, I am a DNC softie.
And alum.
Alum. I worked there for a year and a half, like everyone does. You have your cup of coffee at the DNC and then you move on. I genuinely, and like, I put it in my piece, I think the DNC is like an incredibly important institution. Like the Biden 20 operation that like I oversaw, like would not have succeeded if the DNC had not done a good job of laying out infrastructure in advance that could be absorbed by the winner of the primary.
Totally.
It is its job.
And I would say even in 2024, when like certainly many things went wrong, but like the fact that there was as smooth of a transition in an unprecedented way in July of the election year from one candidate to another candidate, like that again is a testament to the DNC being functional and having laid some groundwork. Like it was crazy. I remember I was texting with you at the time. I was like, how's the old candidate switcheroo going? But like they pulled off the convention like a month later. Like the DNC has done some good things, and there's a lot of smart people there doing hard and important work.
Yeah. Well, the thing about this piece, I mean, you talk about staff at the DNC having to do tough and important work. The DNC research team, and I think it was the research team. It had to have been. I saw their fingerprints all over it on having to go through this document, mark it up, find the sources. It's a pretty funny and interesting read. So I wanted to bring in the top 5 DNC autopsy annotations. There's more than 5. This one starts it, which I think is pretty funny. First, it starts, you see right here, this is the topper. This document reflects the views of the author, not the DNC. The DNC was not provided with the underlying sourcing, interviews, or supporting data for any of the assertions. This is the title page. Built to win, built to last.
I mean, that is just such an insane disclaimer to have to write on the DNC autopsy report that was commissioned by the DNC. Is like, this does not reflect any of the views of the DNC, and the DNC has not been provided with any of the sourcing. Like, what?
Yeah. And you see these amazing markups of the actual piece. States, for example, in battleground state outcomes, the report says states which had consistently and reliably voted for Democratic candidates, including Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, voted for Trump. The note, all of these states voted for Trump in 2016.
All of these consistently Democratic states voted for Trump in 2016.
That's a good one. Loved this one. This is not limited to the United States, as voters around the globe, this is in a section about misinformation, have been subjected to a barrage of extremist misinformation in recent elections. Recent news coverage about changes to the platform known as Twitter has exposed how nearly half of right-wing pro-MAGA accounts actually create and are managed in Russia. And the DNC marks no evidence provided contradicts public reporting.
I mean, having worked on misinformation online for a very long time, that is 100% not true at all. Not even close to true. Also, the whole thing reads like the paper that you write like super last minute and you're trying to fill 5 pages and you're like, in life, as in literature, like it's like this is not limited to the like he's just doing like a thesis on like random shit that's Paul Rivera's thoughts on the world.
Yeah. Unbelievable. This one, I didn't even know what it meant. The GOP's victory in 2024 largely came down to its ability to learn more from President Obama's victory than Democrats did. No evidence provided contradicts claims elsewhere in the report.
Like what?
Oh, my God. Kind of unbelievable.
If only Joe Biden had been there for the great Obama campaigns.
This one I thought was super funny. Per campaign finance. Well, okay, so he says the super majority of Victory Fund ad spending is dedicated to fundraising as a mistake. So that means for the purposes of persuasion, both parties are relying on broadcasting cable to broadcast to carry the majority of their message. They note, per campaign finance law, victory funds or joint fundraising committees are only permitted to run advertising with a fundraising component. That's like, yes, like we ran a bunch of ads out of the Victory Fund, which are, you can only do it for the explicit purpose of fundraising. Like that's the law around.
Yeah, it's like they use the vast majority of these funds for the only legal usage of those funds. All of them, in fact. Like, what the fuck?
Oh, my God. And then this one's great. There was a blatant attempt by the Republican power base to take advantage of name recognition and tough economic conditions to push through an unqualified candidate whose job would have been a little more than rubber stamping the president's agenda. And they say in 2022, Joe Biden was president.
Having to note that in 2022, Joe Biden was president has to take the cake. My God.
Incredible. But this one really, this is in the middle of the report of one of the sections. It goes, conclusion. This section was not provided by the author.
It is like the perfect conclusion. there is no conclusion.
Sort of a classic Democratic Party, you know. But I do think this is actually my read of the document, which I will be honest, I have not read all 192 pages of. I skimmed it and found a few moments, and we had some research look through. But it is interesting. It provides insights and recommendations. I would not say it has like that many. It's like it comes down to the Democrats for a very long period have had a number of problems, and they largely have to do with messaging and the way we spend money. There is not much in here about how we should do those things in the future, which is like a little why like I wanted to be part of the conversation about this, because I do think there are things you need to learn in the future, and then sort of short on that. And you see why Ken is stuck in this position, because that's what this document
And so he keeps being like, well, we need to focus on the future. It's like, as you have said yourself, the entire fucking point of doing an autopsy is to learn lessons from the past, because the future hasn't happened yet, so you can't learn lessons from the future. Like, we're trying to inform how we do shit in 2028 and beyond, and like, oh my God.
Pretty wild. I thought this tweet from Emily Jashinsky, very funny. I wish I could say I was joking, but it turns out the DNC Autopsy was written in Calibri, a suboptimal font. But I do want to give, so like there's this document, has a lot of words, says a lot of stuff. And I do think that like, again, it's like there are things in here that are like interesting insights. Like Paul they're not wrong about some of this stuff. Like there's this one section, he goes through the states and he goes through, like what we can learn from North Carolina and from other states and rural strategies. And he sort of says a bunch of things that I super agree with, like male voters, you can't take them for advantage over a long period of time. Like definition is essential. I mean, that was like my core takeaway, right? Like voters need to know what you do and while you're running.
Yeah.
Short on that, state parties matter. I think we're super clear on that. Like, it's not that there's no good findings in this. It's just like it's an opinion piece.
Right.
Like there's this section where he talks about the breakdown, digital spending, no sourcing provided. I think he's using Media IQ here, which is a source, but it's not sort of listed. Where it shows, broadcast cable versus digital spend in House races. This is real. This is a thing. Like 70% of media typically is spent on traditional broadcast. That is bad. These are problems. And so, the thing I will give credit in the report, to the extent that it was written, there is like sound thinking about where the party needs to go. It's just incomplete, unsourced, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
It's just like mind blowing to me. One, that I mean, all of it's mind blowing to me, but like if you're Ken Martin, like how was there not a conversation with Paul at the beginning of or whoever else was going to be involved? Because one would think it would be more than just a buddy doing a favor. Like, how's there not a conversation where you're like, here's the 250 people you should talk to. Here are like the sections we want. Here's how it, and then like, was there no checking in at any point until they were like, oh shit, we were supposed to release that autopsy and it's already May. Like, what should we do? Oh, I never finished that. Like, I just don't understand. Like, it speaks to like total mismanagement in addition to, dishonesty and other problems. But like to just be like, well, this is what we got. It's like, what? You run the fucking party, dude.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. Another thing, by the way, that they do bring up is, which is true. I mean, they do mention this. The polling team generally they do talk about, and which it seems like he talked to some of the campaign's pollsters who, they sort of mentioned they were brought on late. And DNC says no source material mentioned. I'm sure this is the section down here before the candidate switch. Pollsters never reviewed ad copy or content. I do think it is true. Before the candidate switch, the pollsters were pretty left out of the discussion, and some of that is White House dynamics and things like that. But I think there is some truth to that discussion.
And I mean, I will say, like, one of the things that from the outside that frustrated me the most was it seemed like honest polling was not making its way to President Biden when he was deciding whether or not to step aside. It seemed like he was being painted a rosy picture, and you would know better than I would. But like, obviously, you weren't in the room either.
I actually don't know.
Yeah. But just the reporting that like Donnellan was just kind of like telling him like, oh, you're crushing it, sir. Like, I found that particularly alarming. So it rings true that there was not a lot of like, sharing of the pollster, bringing the pollsters in. I don't know.
I don't know enough. I've been personally skeptical, but maybe it's like I just can't, believe it. Like that, it was just here are the great numbers about whatever. Like I think Biden always kind of looked at the polling numbers that he wanted to see. I mean, it was always the case. And you have and so I don't know about that, but I do think it is the case that, I mean, the pollsters were not as the pollsters became more involved as the campaign went along.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Which is true. A couple of reactions to it have been pretty swift. John Favreau, fellow North Reading High School graduate from the high end version of our podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
Sort of talking about the entire thing. One promised to release the autopsy, put Income Friend in charge, Incompetent Friend produces incoherent report, announce you're not releasing the autopsy, lie about why, gaslight people who ask, say they're the problem, face internal revolt, release the autopsy. And then Paul Rivera was, still working at the DNC until like today.
I thought he was never working at the DNC. I was reliably told he was not paid anything by, Ken Martin.
Yeah.
And then, but look at the way that this is all going down. It's just like indicative of the problem. It's like Amanda Lippman, our friend, former Hillary colleague, like saying like, oh my God, the guy that Martin hired to do the autopsy fucked up so bad is still working for the DNC. And then like an hour later, Alex Thompson's like, I'm told he has been let go. Like they're just like desperately trying to like hold on here. And it's just like, oh my God, just stop.
Yeah. So, what's been interesting about this, though, is, fucking everyone's trying to use this to their ideological advantage. Welcome pack.
I thought these centrist guys, oh my God.
Yep, we have a couple tweets here. Welcome pack, which promotes centrist Democrats, says the autopsy is proof the party needs to moderate. Third way, saying the autopsy draft released today validates the case we've been making post-2024 and are making again today. Democrats must be able to win in the middle, anytime, everywhere.
Just like, dude, people can see this, right? Like, how do you say that? Barely more credibility than Ken Martin here, being like, the real reason they hid this piece of shit was, in fact, because it proves that being a centrist is awesome and Zoran Mamdani's a communist or whatever.
Yeah. And Kyle Tharp had a good tweet thread, which I don't think we have in here, but which basically laid out a lot of people have done autopsies. Way to Win did one, Catalyst did one. There was the Welcome Pack had a great one. The Deciding to Win,
very in-depth.
Simon Bazelon one. So there have been really good, thoughtful conversations, and I think the one thing that has been a reflection point for me, as I put my thing out there and whatever, has been the conversation about it. When people are engaging with it, has been super good faith. And they'll say,
constructive.
And they'll say, I don't agree with this thing. I don't agree with this thing. I heard the brand stuff. Actually, she did have a brand. It was bad. The party brand was, that was the real problem. I've heard stuff about the digital structure stuff that was super constructive and all of it.
There were people that think Gaza was more of a factor.
Yeah,
people can disagree about this stuff.
100%. And so I do think it's there's a need to have a good faith discussion. And hopefully this can be a starting off point of some process to do that. I don't know that we need to litigate it all over again right now. But I just find being well, it confirms my priors. It's
come on. Give me a fucking break.
Give me a break. Yeah. So this brings us to the state of the DNC and where we go from here. If you're first of all, the financial situation of the DNC today, Democratic National Committee cash on hand minus debt is negative 13 million. This tweet from Teddy.
Negative 3 million.
Sorry, negative 3 million. This tweet here from Teddy Schliefer with the Times.
And the RNC is sitting on 124 million.
Yeah.
And the MAGA Inc. has 400 million. Again, they've raised a lot of money at the DNC, but we're not in a good situation across the board here. Kind of the main jobs of the DNC chair are to be a decent voice for the party and outlining what the party stands for and why the Republican Party is bad and raising money. And he's clearly not being effective in either of those roles now at this point, in my estimation.
Yeah, 100%. You said it earlier, because I think it's all right, this is it's funny, it's a little depressing, it's frustrating and all these kinds of things. But there's this question of what do we do now?
Should Ken go?
I think step one to me is that this is a mistake of literally Ken Martin's own making. It is not the DNC ED. It is not the committee members. It is certainly not anyone on the staff. None of these people, I think, have anything to do with this. This is a Ken Martin fuck up.
Totally.
And it has damaged the party. It has damaged the institution. I think there is absolutely no way this guy can stay as DNC chair.
Totally.
It's time.
And again, it's not personal animus to Ken. I don't want him to be canceled or whatever. Yep. I hope he gets a great job after this. This is the kind of fuck up that you cannot continue to be the face of the party after.
100%. And I just think it is a failure. Like this is what's hard, is at a time when the DNC is facing real headwinds, the operation is in real trouble. The party the staff is being let down. And so I just think there's sorry, this is the end of the road here.
And again, part of it was it was super frustrating reading confirmation too from Isaac and others who are reporting out all of these details now that yes, there are a shit ton of donors who are explicitly not giving to the DNC because they have no confidence and they're frustrated about the autopsy not coming out, yada, yada, yada. All things that he flatly denied in the interview with Jon Favreau. And the credibility gap, the trust gap is to me the most the fundamental thing that we need to confront as a party. And when you have the chair being openly dishonest and gaslighting, not just the general public, but DNC members, state party chairs, operatives, dude, you got to go.
Yep. What's your take? I don't actually know that I have an answer on this, which is what should we do now? Is it a do-over? Try it? What lessons can be learned? Is it don't let it go? I literally don't know, because I see on the one hand, it's all right, we should complete this process and whatever. On the other hand, it's the election's in 5 months, and then, I don't know. I don't know what to do.
I would say I do not think we need to do a super exhaustive autopsy process, the kind that you should have done from the get-go. At this point, a lot of thoughtful pieces have been written, not to gas you up, but yours included, that were honest appraisals of what happened and what went wrong. I still think it would be valuable to take in, basically say we are open for submission from party chairs, whoever the right stakeholders are, who may have a unique lens to what we think went wrong in our state or what went right in our state, with lessons for here's what I would say moving forward. So I think it's totally, I would say let's collect all of that information, but I don't think that the DNC needs to hire or devote a big team to traveling out to all the places and doing these kinds of interviews. At this point, fucking the lessons hopefully have been learned through other means. But this was a failure. Let's fucking move on, like Ken wanted to do all along. This chapter has come to an end, but I still think it's valuable to get input from the people who are on the ground, from people who are engaging with constituency groups, who are who can speak to this killed us. On every time I talked to someone in Michigan, I was getting pushback on Gaza stuff or whatever it is. I think that's valuable information to gather, but I don't think that the DNC should now expend a ton of resources trying to do, all right, we're going to start from the beginning and do the full autopsy again.
Yeah. Well, we are going to continue this conversation because for the very first time here on Nobody Knows Anything, we have an elected official on our show.
The last election he'll ever win.
Yeah, exactly. We're about to ruin this man's career because we have a special guest in Congressman
Khanna.
Whoa.
Special guest.
Khanna.
Well, we have a pretty important guest today. I would say that this is the first guest we've had who's ever been elected to anything successfully. And so I don't know how we got you to do this. Are we paying you? I don't know what this is,
I thought politicians pay the influencers. Is it?
That's right. Yeah,
exactly.
you can pay us.
We'll take it.
This is great. Welcome, Congressman Khanna, to Nobody Knows Anything. We're so excited to have you.
Appreciate it. Appreciate the humility of your podcast.
Yeah, exactly. Podcasting is the most noble profession in this economy, so it really matters. We have your statistics here on the screen. You represent California's 17th district, which is Silicon Valley, and arguably the only effective Democrat in all of Congress. So there you go.
That's my other data point for you. As far as I can tell, the only effective Democrat Congress.
Yeah. How is, I know Silicon Valley is an interesting place to represent if you are pushing for, a agenda that takes on tech. And I know that there have been a lot of folks, Gary Tan, enemy of the pod, who are not super thrilled with a lot of it. How has that been? How do you navigate representing Silicon Valley and also trying to regulate Silicon Valley?
Yeah, well, there was a headline in the New York Times, tech billionaires plot ouster of Khanna because of his support of the billionaire tax. And one of my friends, a prominent politician, called me up and said, "Ro, now be honest, did you plant that story?"
Exactly. Your enemies sometimes say more than your friends.
Sometimes I'm like, maybe the billionaires shouldn't have the billionaires advocating for them,
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. As a comms guy, I would argue against it.
But it's, what's so remarkable is I say I'm the nice guy. Like most people know me, I'm 49, try to be relatively polite, civil. I was like, have you met the folks in their 30s? Because they don't want you to exist. They're not as nice. Like we can do this the easy way, which is you build wealth, great, you build innovation, and you realize the social contract is broken, that the economy is lopsided and unfair, that too few people in this country have too much of the nation's wealth and power, and that you should pay a basic tax, and we should make sure everyone has health care and childcare and good paying jobs and have some shot to buy a home. Or we can continue to be divided, and it's really going to make a revolution in the country.
I say this all the time. It's like paying a moderate wealth tax on your billion plus dollar wealth is better than pitchforks, So maybe they should. I'm not advocating for pitchforks, but it just feels
like I'm not advocating, but
but it
I call it the anti-revolution tax.
Exactly. I like that. That's good.
Yeah. Some big news today, Congressman, the DNC farting out its much vaunted autopsy. Curious what you make of it. I'm sure you haven't, it is 100 pages long. I'm sure you haven't had a chance to read it, but curious what you make of this entire affair. And is it a good thing it came out? Is it a bad thing? Where should we go from here?
Well, it's good it came out. It should have just come out early on. Anytime you try to cover things up or not release things or not be transparent, it always makes it worse. And unless you're Donald Trump, it always ends up coming out. So, we should just be for transparency. But, I did a skim of the thing and I put it in one of the chat bots in 192 pages and I saw it doesn't have the word Gaza in it. Now, that's just wherever you stand on that. I was in Michigan, I was in Wisconsin. Well, let me tell you, Gaza was an issue. And so it's kind of odd if that wasn't addressed. And I think the basic thing people want, regardless of ideology, is just willingness to say hard truths and be blunt. And if that report isn't blunt, it's going to lead to as many questions as answers.
How do you, it's sort of interesting, because my thing in my bloviating piece was, I think... Yeah, well, thanks. It was not 102 pages, but it was close. It was close. It was pretty, equally as hard to read as Paul's. But my basic theory of the case was maybe it didn't poll as the top issue, but if you talk to anybody, it was clearly a thing, and it was clearly reducing enthusiasm. How did you feel it on the ground as an issue?
Well, first, look, I have a tremendous amount of respect for Vice President Harris, but they kept sending me out to Michigan, and they would send out Pramila, and I was like, it's going to make no difference. I'm in Congress. They know there's 37 of us in Congress are against the aid. I'm not going to be president of the United States. They need to hear from the people who are going to be the Secretary of State or the National Security Advisor. And so I certainly knew in Michigan and Wisconsin it was an issue, and it was a challenge. I mean, I'm not saying it was an easy thing to do, and I have my own views on what to do, and I'm not saying my views are the views everyone needs to share, but at least acknowledge that this was a huge issue in 2024.
Yeah, I'm curious, separate from whatever Paul Rivera's autopsy said, if you're looking back at 2024, and obviously we want to mostly be looking forward, but you learn from mistakes in the past. That's the point of the autopsy. What's your short minute-long version of what you think went wrong in 2024 and what it says about where we should be going in 2028?
We became defenders of the status quo and instead of saying you were screwed, the system is terrible. The past generation of leadership has failed you. They're not the greatest generation. They're a failed generation. This is the one skill Donald Trump has, to insult everyone. They screwed you. They shafted you. We're so polite. We don't want to criticize a past friend, a past administration. We need to be this is an economy that is lopsided and unfair, that has screwed folks. People are accumulating and hoarding wealth in my district, 1/3 of the nation's wealth. And the kids I grew up with in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, they can't buy a home. They basically can't afford childcare. They don't know if they're going to have a good job. And our single highest mission is going to be the economic independence and the economic success of the vast majority who've been left out of the modern age. Morning, afternoon, night, that's what we're going to focus. And I think that clarity of purpose is what the party needs.
Congressman, what do you make of Ken Martin in this moment? I mean, he's got a super tough job, but what does this autopsy process do for him? him, foretell for him? Does it matter? How do you, where do you think he stands?
Well, Ken is a friend. He comes from the Paul Wellstone tradition. He's acknowledged that he should have released the autopsy first. But I do believe that he's trying to build more grassroots support. He's two things that he's doing that I agree with. One is he got rid of the superdelegates in terms of the first ballot in the DNC. He was trying to say that we shouldn't have super PACs in Democratic primaries. Now, we can't unilaterally disarm. Whoever our nominee is in the House or the Senate or the presidency should have super PACs if Republicans have them, but we don't need it amongst ourselves. And so on those two issues, I've been supportive of his efforts.
Well, Congressman, a topic we talk about on this show quite a bit is artificial intelligence, its impact on politics. I think we had someone come up to us and say, "You guys do the AI show." We're both very pilled, as they say. You have been someone who's been pretty out in front on this issue. Releasing your own framework around artificial intelligence. How do you see the politics of artificial intelligence shaping up over the next couple of years?
That AI shouldn't be for the tech billionaires. It needs to be for the people. Now, the question is the specifics of that. But basically, many people don't trust the elite to use this technology to actually cure cancer or to use the technology to make huge progress on renewable energy. They see this as something that's going to be used to eliminate jobs and enrich the very, very few. And so, in my view, there are three basic things we need to be doing. One, we should be taxing agentic AI more than we're taxing workers. Right now, you get a bonus depreciation to build an AI data center and to have AI software, whereas you got to pay a payroll tax in healthcare for hiring a worker. That makes no sense to me. Second, we should make sure that human beings are in the loop, that there's human judgment and human beings are doing things as opposed to just allowing this technology to eliminate jobs. And third, coming up with this proposal, Work for America. A lot of folks, young folks, are struggling with jobs, not just folks who are at trade schools or who didn't go to college, people who've gone to Princeton and Dartmouth. So why not hire 1 million Americans to rebuild their community or to come to the federal government, rebuild civic service in this country, not just the physical infrastructure of this country, but the social infrastructure, and use this moment, most patriotic, bold jobs agenda that the country has seen since LBJ or FDR.
Bernie Sanders and AOC obviously signed on to a piece of legislation that would ban data centers effectively, and in theory then use that as to buy time to, pass a more robust agenda. Where do you stand on that? I mean, should we be sort of hitting the moratoria and using that as leverage? How do you think about, where they stand on this particular issue?
Yeah, I haven't come out for a moratorium, though I understand they're saying do it 1 or 2 years. And people's anger about it isn't just about the electricity prices or the water use. It's just this anxiety of allowing technology to grow in a way that gives them less control over their lives. What I've said is that we need a new social contract, that a lot of these data centers have been extractive. They're sticking local residents with the bill. They're taking water instead of using dry cooling. They're not contributing public compute. Yeah, they're creating jobs, and those are not minimal for building trades, but they're not leading to jobs beyond the building trades because it doesn't take that many people to operate them. And they should be a commitment to creating technology jobs and investing capital. Someone said 90% of venture capital this year has been in California. How about committing to more capital in the communities you're building these data centers? But what these data centers have been is just extractive tools, vacuum out all the wealth into my district and hollow out some of these communities. And that's where we need to have a reset.
Yeah. Donald Trump has been changing his tune on AI over the last couple of weeks, going from, full accelerationist to talking about either mandatory or, voluntary pre-deployment checks, things like his administration was talking about having an FDA for AI. And then, may as soon as today order an executive order on AI. What do you make of Trump on this particular issue? I mean, what is going on? Do you take the switch or not?
Trump changing his tune? I mean,
yeah, first time for everything.
Yeah, I still remember with the Trump speech, it was like when he was bashing in a way that was hurting folks, trans kids. And he's like, yeah, in 2016, I didn't even know what this trans stuff was. But now I say trans and they all applaud. It's big. Like, this is literally how the guy makes makes policy. It has nothing to do with like belief or conviction or just like, well, where's the crowd or something. Now he's gotten worse at reading the crowd, and he doesn't care as much because he's not running for re-election. So he's gotten us into these foreign wars, and he doesn't care about the Epstein files. Donald Trump is the worst president for Marco Rubio or JD Vance. He's like, it's your problems.
Yeah.
Part of him secretly, I think, doesn't want them to win because he wants to be like the only Donald Trump can win in the MAGA movement or something. So
I totally agree with that.
But I think he realizes, and this is why I think he had some connection with Zoran and some, even though he doesn't admit it, with Elizabeth Warren. He gets it. Like, people feel screwed. They don't feel like they're being able to pay bills. They are afraid that their jobs are going to AI, and he's trying to correct and see if he can have any at least correction in rhetoric. Of course, there's not going to be any substance or policy.
And do you put any stock in it does seem like at least some of it was motivated by the administration getting a preview of Anthropic's new Mythos model, or Mythos as some people pronounce it, and sort of freaking out about the security vulnerabilities that could be linked to that and other risks. Do you think that there is like a genuine concern about AI, and are you doomerish at all about where we're headed here?
I don't think that they have a genuine concern about the job displacement. I think they've basically given the keys to these tech billionaires. I mean, for a guy who was railing against China and railing against the Wall Street and Silicon Valley elite offshoring jobs and getting bad trade deals, like, he basically takes the global elite to China to beg them for $1 trillion to put into America, where they would further erode American jobs. I mean, it's just total hypocrisy. So I think he has no concern of the jobs. I do think they've been freaked out about Mythos, and they realize that they need some control on when these frontier models are released, timeline of the release, who should be consulted before the release. But they've undermined what Biden was doing. Like, Biden had an AI safety commission at the Commerce Department. They basically unwind that to say, no, it just should be for accelerationism and no real safety check. And now they're rethinking it. What we really need is a AI safety regulatory agency. This is not some radical thought. If you believe the tech billionaires that this is some incredible transformative technology, well, when we had aviation, we had the FAA. When we had electricity, we had FERC. When we had the nuclear energy, we had the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. So why wouldn't you have a regulatory commission for AI?
Before we move off AI, one thing, Marc Andreessen getting in a little bit of heat on Twitter for his Joe Rogan appearance, where he said, AI workers beat human workers. We'll play the clip right here, saying they never file HR complaints.
Right. So you tell a normal person, you hire somebody over here, you hire somebody here.
Next today,
the bots never get frustrated with you.
I think it's just such a misguided view of human contribution, right? I mean, like, what makes things work? Like, why could we not have AI robots run a campaign? Because it's perseverance and a teamwork and setting a vision and a goal. Like, you think AI could inspire the nation like Barack Obama did, and giving like an AI robotic speech? There's so many things that human beings do that are unique, and these folks are just devoid of that. And instead of using AI as a tool to make workers more productive, to make them thrive, they're basically using AI to eliminate these workers who they view as a nuisance, or they're anti-union, to pad their own pockets more. And that is why people in this country don't trust AI. Like, if they were like, yeah, we're going to use AI to get diagnosis of cancer, people would be like, great. But they don't trust it because they know that the people like Andreessen or Musk are going to use it to eliminate jobs and get more power over work.
And the focus on the HR complaint thing seems like a personal Marc Andreessen problem. He's like, we have finally solved the greatest challenge facing mankind today, which is those damn HR complaints that I can't stop getting.
It's the HR that they keep filing. Tough day to be Andreessen Horowitz's HR person. All right, we're going to turn to a quick segment we call Hot Seat. Before we let you go, a couple of quick questions for the congressman. The first one is, what is your P-doom, the likelihood of human extinction as a result of artificial intelligence? Mine's 10 on a scale 10%? Of 1 to 100, about
I'm like
100.
20%.
I'm 10. Where are you?
I'm at 0.1. I have a much broader concern that, like, human beings will screw it up. Like, that's
fair. All right. After seeing Massie lose his primary, have you considered switching to being pro-Epstein?
I really felt genuinely sort of sad when Massie lost because he's actually a friend. I mean, I know everyone says my friend, et cetera, but Massie and I were friends, and he took a huge risk in put his career on the line. But what I take, as a takeaway is that he was winning young voters by 30. Yeah. And, all this talking about how do we get young men back? How do we get young voters back? We lost to Trump. Well, one way is to get the people who voted for Massie to be in our coalition. And I know some people are upset that I worked with Massie or Marjorie Taylor Greene, et cetera. And my own view on this is, look, I have my own convictions. I'm never going to compromise on abortion rights, on women's rights, on trans rights. I understand some of those folks have said things that are hurtful. But if they're going to come around to voting for things that are important to stop wars or to expose the Epstein class, then that's how you grow our coalition to be a majority. And that's the way I've done things in the House.
I totally agree with that.
So, Congressman, you have made a name for yourself as someone who is going to go on a a lot of podcasts, which brings you to the real bottom of the barrel right now.
Like you got to get someone like who doesn't do the podcast.
I know.
You got Khanna, he does them all.
Yeah, hey,
we're pleased to have you.
Yeah, we're thrilled to have you here. What podcast do you, other than this one, what podcast do you most regret doing?
That's a great question. I'm trying to remind. It's actually with a podcast. I don't even remember which one from the left, where they were basically making me seem like a imperialist because I was supporting aid to Ukraine. And it's not that I regretted the conversation, but it's just like it sort of was. Just a smear. So it's probably the toughest one.
Let the record show that the congressman prefers Benny Johnson to the left. Okay, here's a quote from your now wife describing your second date. We saw a terrible play. We had an awkward conversation over dinner, and then he basically proceeded to ask me to spend the rest of my life with him. Is that an accurate summary?
That is an accurate summary. And, my wife is wonderful, very supportive, but she kind of has her own life. And so doesn't, she basically is like, when I won for Congress, she's like, okay, now you're an incumbent. I got you elected because I ran twice not being married. Then I was married and she campaigned and won. And she's like, now if you screw it up, like, that's your fault or something. But
I did see her like crushing it on your 2016 race or something. I was like, oh, you got a secret weapon here. And a quick follow-up. Is it also true that after she rebuffed you, you continued courting her by periodically emailing her your press clips?
Yes.
Sick move. Alpha move.
In the way that everything speaks, apparently when I was young and ambitious, and, I sent some letter to President Clinton being like, Mr. President, I admire you. And I think that, you made all this difference. And believe it or not, like someone wrote a Washington Post hit piece on me, leaking that letter. Like, how can Khanna be a Sanders guy if he's writing at 27 or 30 to Clinton? I was like, all right, that's the first they've got. But so I'm sure I was sending her things from the vaulted local press in Santa Clara County, which obviously didn't work. And it took 4 years before she would.
I send my wife clips of this show every day, and she's yet to watch one. So I don't know if it works.
It's auto-filtered.
It's auto-filtered. She's like, I'll get to this guy. Okay, one last question, Congressman, before we let you go. There are rumors, many people say, Roka Khanna may run for president. Who knows? If you were to be president of the United States, what would your Secret Service code name be? What's the best one?
Well, that's so far out in terms of like, how about like showing up beyond 1% first or something?
Yeah. Bit of a mouthful, but
that's great.
Like before you start measuring like who your Secret Service agent, like, maybe like more than like people in Santa Clara should have heard of the guy. But it's obviously got to be like Epstein Slayer or something.
That's catchier than Marshall Plan for America.
Yeah, exactly.
Just as Marshall a code name, I like the Marshall Plan for America as a thing. Wait, and one last thing, if we can pull it up here, I did want to, since you mentioned your old letter writing, I did find. I went back to the 1990 Philadelphia Inquirer, and I have a letter to the editor from one Roka, a ninth grader at Holland Junior High School, like going in on the Gulf War. Lest anyone thought that you just started being anti-war, you launched famously one of the first anti-Iraq war.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. Go
No,
ahead.
go. I was just saying you launched one of the
It was
first.
the thing I was most proud of, actually, of that I've written. It's, my grandfather spent 4 years in jail as part of Gandhi's independence movement, and that's not just like a talking point. That actually is what inspired me. I mean, he was in jail in the 1930s, 1940s, and when I was 14, they had an assignment. The ninth grade teacher, Mrs. Robb, was like, "You got to get published," and so we wrote this. I wrote this piece and sent it to the Bucks County Courier-Times or the Philadelphia Inquirer. They published something in the Bucks County Courier-Times. Actually had a headline saying, "Read this 14-year-old's lip story." And I thought, wow, the president of the United States is going to read my op-ed. Now I realize, like, right in the New York Times, the president still doesn't read it. But it was like exhilarating to this Indian American kid of Hindu faith, immigrants growing up in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, 99% white. I couldn't hit for anything. They used to say, "Watch the bunt" when I came up.
Watch the butt.
I grew up, and I still have, this incredible faith in this country to be decent, to be open, to be able to participate in the political process. And it's really what shaped my values more than anything.
I mean, that's an impressive answer from in response to a 1990 letter to the editor I'm pulling up. But I did see one other quote from your mom saying, like any good Indian mom, we wanted him to be an engineer or a doctor, but he's always been an idealist. So,
and here you are,
evident
on a podcast with two idiots. So, Congressman, we are really grateful for your time. Thanks for coming on. Well, that was great. Our first elected official.
He's good, man.
We're growing up so fast.
He's good.
Yeah. I thought a couple of things I thought were interesting about it. One is a decent answer on what he thought would go forward. Wasn't who I hate. He sort of didn't defend Ken Martin, but kind of defended Ken.
He was, nicer to Ken than I think many Democrats will be, arguably. Certainly nicer than we have been.
Certainly than we were. But we have a California-themed show today.
Yes.
Cali, baby.
And much more important people than us, the greatest Californians.
The greatest Californians. Earlier this week, Cap Ideas Festival happened, and Cap Ideas Festival is Center for American Progress. It's like what they call a cattle call. People show up. They give speeches. Gavin Newsom was there, Ruben Gallego, Wes Moore, Cory Booker.
I think cattle calls are also what Marc Andreessen kept getting HR called for on him. Maybe that was cat call. I can't be sure.
It's all one and the same. But because of it, a couple of days
Special
ago,
guest.
we had Addisu Demissie, who is one of the most sought-after California operatives and has been on every other podcast about the state of California. So we tried to have a conversation with him about the stuff he hasn't talked about quite yet. So if we miraculously change costumes, that is why. So we will show you our wide-ranging conversation with Addisu Demissie, another special guest.
Special guest.
Well, we have a special guest from the West Coast, Best Coast, Addisu Demissie right here.
What's up?
Unbelievable. You have been on every single podcast.
I'm on the circuit
In
right
the
now.
last week.
People want to talk California, and I got something to say. So
Where
here
do
are.
we rank in the most embarrassing podcast?
I think
that
I've
you've
been
had
on
to be
like 4 this week, and you guys are around 6 or 7.
Awesome. We love it. Perfect. Totally great. Well, Addisu, one of the most skilled California operators that we've got, and national operators too, managed Gavin Newsom's campaign.
I did.
And also prolific tweeter about the Golden State Warriors.
I
and
prefer
Liverpool.
I prefer to tweet about sports and politics, but I know where the bread is buttered.
Way, exactly.
I mean, like the trajectory of the Democratic Party and the Warriors the last couple of years has been kind of similar.
Okay. I did not agree to come on here for that.
I feel like you are the leading expert on California politics that is not currently working.
I might be the only one who's
Right. You're the only one.
Only one.
So everyone's like Addisu.
That's why I'm getting all these calls. They're like, "Oh my god!" Like somebody who's not involved. But I have.
Can I ask about that? Why not be involved?
The honest truth is, I've taken a cycle off of doing campaigns. I still love politics and I still love doing it, but I was burnt out after like 20, but I rolled through 22, rolled through 24, and finally at the beginning of last year, I was like, I needed a break. And
sayonara.
So it's been hard, honestly, because I love the game, and obviously it's a competitive race in my home state, but it's for the best. So I can do podcasts like this and not just spout talking points.
And I mean, with so many compelling candidates to choose from, how would you even have?
Where would I even begin?
It's just a fountain of options.
Yeah. That is true.
Yeah,
I think
there are many of them.
Yeah, I opened my ballot the other day, which I still have not voted. I'm an undecided voter, I swear to God. There are, I think, 62 candidates on the ballot, and it's literally like a page plus long. It's insane.
Well, let's see if after talking about California Gov, if you've moved after the informed vote question. Let's see, let's see where we're at.
California governor's race.
Taking a look at California governor, the race, in a pretty interesting place. We have some polling from race to the White House. Steve Hilton in the lead, Xavier Beccerra in second, Tom Steyer in third, and basically everybody else kind of an also ran. Becerra, you can see this sort of precipitous jump over the last couple of weeks. What? Why?
What happened?
Why?
What happened?
Well, we do know one thing that happened.
Yeah, exactly. I can tell
There's
you
one big factor.
Yeah, I mean, the Swalwell implosion of his own doing changed the race entirely. And I honestly, there's one thing I'm surprised by is what happened, which is basically overnight, not unlike what happened with then Vice President Biden and, after South Carolina, like 15% of the vote just moved from Swalwell to Becerra. I thought it was going to fracture in some different way. I thought Porter, I thought Steyer, who's been advertising for 6 months. I thought maybe Mahan, who knew? But it literally was just like a transfer of wealth from Swalwell to Becerra overnight, and that seems to have stuck.
And do you have a theory of the case, why that is? Why? Because I thought the same thing. I thought Katie Porter will get a bunch of it, and Steyer will get some of it.
I think, I did see polling way back, like when, maybe a year ago at this point, like in the spring of 25, where Becerra was relatively well known and relatively well liked, and people weren't choosing him for whatever reason at that point. But he, amongst the also ran candidates, or what used to be the also ran candidates, he had name recognition. He's been the attorney general. He obviously was in the Biden cabinet, and he had a generally positive impression.
Right.
And I think in many ways he's just like the next palatable option. I don't want to diss the guy. He's fine. I think he's good. Yeah. But, I think what voters basically said was okay, who's the next palatable option? The weird thing, I think, is why not Steyer? Why not Porter? Why not Mahan? All of whom have been aggressively campaigning and spending money for the last 6 months, and people just jumped over all three of them and went.
Right. I think they each have their talents, but I do feel like there is some negative polarization against those people in a way that there wasn't against Becerra, where, as you say, people were Becerra's fine. He's a Democrat. Katie Porter definitely has her fans. She also has her detractors, and Steyer, I think, has maybe hit a ceiling with, spending $10 trillion of advertising.
I also think Latino, forget, it's a lesser portion of the electorate, but we are a third Latino. It's a heavily Latino state, right? And Latino surname, Latino candidates there's affinity there, not to mention real affinity in the community. He's from LA, from Latino LA. So you put all that together, and it's basically a coalition of Latinos and normie Democrats who who are a big portion of the electorate, 20%. And that's all you need. We didn't talk about the mechanics of all this, but this is a multi-candidate top two primary where the second place candidate is probably only going to get 22% of the vote. So you don't even need to get that much. And he's got it.
And interesting, we're recording this on Tuesday, not live, breaking news. Oh my God, we're cheating. As you will note, because we are probably, God willing, in the actual live show, not wearing
the same clothes.
Same clothes. Changed. But a new poll out today, Mike Madrid, who I believe is working for Becerra, tweeting out a California Democratic Party poll, which is indicating that Becerra and Steyer are the top two Democrats, but Hilton and Becerra basically running away as the top two. But very interesting that the California Democrats are putting out polls to be please get out.
It is a very funny
this race.
So to give folks a little bit of context, everyone was freaking out that because it's a top two primary, all party, everyone was freaking out that the Democrats were going to get locked out. And the Democratic Party was well, of course, we're not going to put our thumb on the scale, but we're just going to start putting out polling showing the top two candidates are Republicans.
You guys might want to consider, I don't know.
It's a very funny strategy. And because now they just keep putting them out. And now they're all right, let's do the consolidation behind Becerra.
And ironically, I think there's definitely a higher chance of there being two Democrats.
Yeah, totally.
And that make it to which it has its own downsides.
Totally.
That there being two Republicans. But at the time,
there are some I like the top two thing in theory, but there definitely end up being some unintended consequences, like when you had last time Adam Schiff was, running for an open Senate seat and boosting.
Oh, I did that shit in 2018.
Yeah,
Gavin's campaign. I mean, it's part of the game.
Because if basically in that election, which Katie Porter was also running in, the idea was if the two of them are locked in if they make it through to the runoff, you're just locked in a months long dem on dem.
Like Steve Hilton is not going to be the governor unless there is a extinction level event that happens to the other person. Californians will vote for a raccoon over Steve Hilton if that's where we end up.
Despite his beautiful accent. Here's the thing. At least if he doesn't win, he can at least narrate some audiobooks. We can elect him to do that.
It would be very fitting if for America 250, we finally pay back the favor.
You're welcome. Here's our largest state.
Here's the fourth largest economy in the world, and we're giving it to some random guy with a random
British Fox News guy. Well, interesting. You sort of point out, Kalshi actually has a market on what the likely odds are of certain outcomes. 73% chance is a Democrat and a Republican. 2 Democrats, 28%. Basically, a 5% chance of a lockout, which seems.
I even think that's high.
Seems to be pretty low.
I think that. In fact, I'm ready to say on this 2 weeks out.
Wow.
There's my prediction.
Calling his shots.
It is not happening. That there is. I think 2 Democrats is probably not happening, but 2 Republicans is definitely not happening.
Yeah. And the most
enjoy the freak out, everybody. I hope you had fun for a couple months.
I kind of enjoyed it.
I want to talk a little bit about and sort of walk through a couple of these candidates, because the big thing that I think is the overarching. I talk to people in California. They are like, everyone sucks, and I'm voting strategically. And there's like a million reasons why. I'm really curious about Tom Steyer, who, personally, I like quite a bit. Probably if I was voting in California, I would probably vote for Tom Steyer. That is not an endorsement. I am not being paid for that.
Although, honestly,
no one pays us. No one pays us.
No one pays you. They really
sweet $100,000 check.
If you want to pay me to consult
please
for Tom
email
Steyer,
the following.
What's up at nobodyknows.wtf.
Just dub right over it. That Tom Steyer is a fucking home run candidate. I don't know why anyone's not
unbelievable. Why is everyone so mad at Tom? But it is basically the Los Angeles Times with a story about his $192 million spending. I mean, that is crazy. And it just seems like it's not clicking. Like, what is it? What's missing? What's his problem? What's his problem?
I have 2 theories of this. One is it's clicked pretty decently. Like
right.
he would be nowhere but for the spending.
Yeah.
But at some point there's diminishing returns, obviously. But I think I guess that I would take 2 points. One is I think he did too many direct-to-camera Tom Steyer talking at the ads.
It does seem to be a favorite genre of his.
God bless him. But after a while, you just get sick of somebody telling you how great they are. And they've done they actually have made some really good spots. And not that ads are everything, but probably in the last 2 months have pivoted to more validators. Khanna has been on the in a statewide spot for him. Isaac Bryan, who's a legislator from the South LA, black guy, has been on an ad for him. Other random people. Anyway, point is they pivoted, but I think for 4 or 5 months it was basically just Tom Steyer telling me that he was awesome, and I think that did wear on people a little bit. But also the second point, maybe the more important point, Californians generally speaking don't like self-funders. This is a tradition. Meg Whitman tried this. Chechi back in the 90s tried. It's a tradition in our politics that people try to run for governor with their own money, and they hit a ceiling, and there's a certain subset of mostly Democratic voters or Democratic-leaning voters who are just can't get down with the rich guys. And I don't think he's dead. I think he can still win. I think it will be one of Becerra or Steyer, but there's definitely a ceiling. He just has to hope that the ceiling is 22, and not 18.
Right. What would he, if you're advising Tom Steyer, what does Tom Steyer need to do to come back?
He needs to take some of Becerra's vote, or he needs to annihilate Porter, probably Porter and Mahan, and take all of their vote.
Yeah.
But yeah, he has I don't know what his ceiling is. I'm sure they do in their polling, but he just has to get one more vote than Becerra, right? So there are 2 ways to do it. You take it from somebody else, or if you take one from Becerra, that's +2, and you get it in your column, that's +2 for you. And he's been trying, I will say, the strategy for the last couple of weeks for sure has been coming after Becerra.
Yeah.
And I think we'll see. Doesn't seem to be working that well.
Yeah.
I think the next strategy is going to be trying to take from Porter and Mahan and just, lean in a little bit to the natural tendency, I think, of the voters to vote strategically, like you said up front. And I do think there's a chance that the bottom falls out of Mahan and Porter because voters want to go with the winner.
The bottom does seem to be falling out of Katie Porter and Matt Mahan, Katie Porter, and her single issue campaign against her son.
Who may soon be living on my couch. I'm the candidate here who knows what it's like to worry that your kids are not going to be able to afford to move out and will wind up living on your couch. And I'm a parent of 3 teenagers. I don't want these kids living on my couch. I want them to be able to move out. Here I am, a mom. Don't want my kid to live on my couch. And frankly, like staring that down with these 3 teenagers. Are they ever going to be able to live on their own? And everybody wants to talk at this debate. This is worse than my teenagers.
She's just like, I fucking had it with my damn kids.
All I'm saying is it seems like there's a deal to be done if Tom Steyer buys 1 to 3 houses for Katie Porter's children.
Exactly.
I don't know the campaign finance implications of that, but it does
said
feel...
she's not for sale, but like it sure seems like if you could tempt your kids with the 1 bedroom.
Billy Bobby and Teddy Porter working at Next Gen America.
You guys are terrible. Why did I agree to do this? I know I did this to myself. No, it's message discipline. I'll say that. I think the moment when Swalwell dropped out and there was sort of this reset of the race was really Porter's big moment. And it just didn't redound to her benefit. And I think she, not unlike Steyer, has had a ceiling in the race, and that ceiling partially of her own doing, partially because Steyer got in the race in the first place, right? Like,
if she was the left candidate,
I think she'd be winning right now.
Yeah.
And so she's been going after Steyer more than Becerra, it feels like, recently, although she's kind of been shooting at both. But her lane was the lane that Steyer came and occupied and honestly moved to her left.
Yeah, went to the left
which
on
from Katie Porter. But he just grabbed it and ran with it. And, it's a great base from which to start in California. We have a progressive electorate.
Totally. I mean, I have been interested. Like, I watched a couple of the debates and I watched the housing forum with Ezra Klein. I want to be an educated non-voter from DC here, but like, I thought that Mahan and Porter have been like the 2 most impressive on policy, and in these debates. And I don't know if you have a theory of the case on why neither of them kind of like, I guess maybe Mahan was late getting in.
Yeah, Mahan is all about late.
Timing.
Yeah, it's about timing. I think he was sold a bill of goods about how easy it would be to surge in this race. Like, it is difficult.
And he kind of spent spent a few months trying to and he was like trying to get them to come to him and be like, who's going to like take up my housing thing? And then
I forget when he got in. When was it? Was it February, March?
It was like pretty recent.
Yeah. It was relatively close to the filing deadline. So I think it's just too late. A little too late. I think he's done well for himself. Honestly, I think Porter has done well for herself in performance, right? And she just ran for Senate last cycle. So like, she's got some reps, but they have done a good job running. I think it goes back to my previous point though. It's just really tough to run in a state as big as we are. Yeah. And honestly, our electorate is just disengaged largely from politics. And certainly they were in the entirety of last year, and really now just tuning in. And unless you have $192 million, right? You're kind of stuck fighting with a knife.
It is one of the few states where because Mahan's gotten raised $20 million or something in a pretty short period of time, but it just doesn't go as far in California and other
people
states.
on this podcast will understand that's IE rates.
Right.
Versus LUR that you have when you're Steyer spending your own money. So it's like goes a lot further. So.
Yeah, totally.
Gavin Newsom, I hear there's some rumors on the streets here in Washington that he's going to run for president. And I've heard this. And he is actually currently the front runner in Calshi and Poly Market as well, above AOC and Kamala Harris, although decreasing after his cap ideas speech.
Don't say that
Today. No, I'm kidding. It was actually quite good. It was actually quite good. But still the front runner. And I feel like we actually kind of rarely talk about him specifically on this show because it's sort of like Gavin Newsom's running for president. Yeah.
And he's good at this. I mean, like he had like the best possible 2025. I think going into 2025 and at the beginning of 2025 when he, took some heat from the left, at least for having Charlie Kirk and Steve Bannon on his podcast, seemingly tacking a little bit to the right on some stuff. People were low on Gavin, but by the end of 2025 and having led the Prop 50, he definitely won the year. So I feel like part of it is just like regression to the mean. But tell us, I mean, as his former, did you run two?
No, I just ran the
2018 gubernatorial campaign. Yeah, what do you think?
I think he's going to run, obviously.
Breaking.
Breaking news. Like, I don't know anything. I just think it. I think I do think it has to, he has 4 kids. Like, he said this on podcasts, and trust me, I know the guy. I know him well. I know his wife well. Like, they have veto power over this. Like, if they don't want him to do it, he's not going to do it. But I think, obviously, I'm not dumb. Like, I think he wants to do it. He's positioning himself to do it. And if he gets the go sign, he's going to do it. And I think he's going to be formidable. Like, I don't think anybody is the favorite, or to the extent anybody's the favorite, they're like the 23% favorite or whatever. Right. It's like not a favorite at all. But will he have the resources? Will he have the platform? Will he be able to raise money quickly? Will he have support quickly? Will he have the biggest state in the union as like a platform off of which to jump? Does he have the skills? Like, he's got it all. He's got all the raw materials, but you guys have both worked presidential campaigns. I've worked too many. Like, rubber has to meet the road, and like the devil is in the details. And I think but I have seen the man up close. He is a LeBron James level political talent. Yeah. And the question is, can you translate that in this moment? Is he the right person?
Addisu, thank you for entering the pain cave today and spending some time with us. We'll check in again. We'll see how.
If I pissed anybody off, actually, I don't.
It's all my fault.
Yeah, it's all Rob's fault.
What a show! A lot of autopsy news, a lot to take in.
Lots to take in.
Thank you to Addisu, to Bro Khanna for being on the show. You can see it says on Monday. I know many of the dozens of you who are listening are holding on for our Sunday evening show with a Monday release because of the holiday. We're going to record on Monday and release on Tuesday, the day after. So look out for that. Enjoy your holiday weekend. And for Jesse Larrick, I'm Rob Flaherty. Thank you for watching Nobody Knows Anything.
We'll catch you Monday.
Nobody knows anything.